Hi guys, how are you? Hi Carrie, hi Ann Wignham. Okay, let me see. How do we like type to each other in this thing? Can you go, oh, chat. Oh, okay. I'm just typing in here. The webinar hasn't started yet, but maybe you guys can tell me, can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay? You can just like type in the thing. Yay, okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the for the correction on the spelling. Well, thank you guys for joining. This is exciting. I always, you know what, I kind of want to have a format where I can like see everyone else because I sort of feel like I no, I can't see you. And I was having this conversation this morning with myself, being like, I wonder if I should open it up so I can like see them. And I'm like, no, because if I was joining a webinar, like the last thing I would want is like for someone to see my face. So no, I can't see anyone, but I can see you on the screen, but I can't actually, see anything else. It's just like a black box. Great. So while we wait for the other people to join, do you guys want to tell me, do you have interviews coming up? Is this more just like a general prep for you? Give me like a little bit of context so that when I go through the content, I can actually like say something relevant and interesting. Yeah, just go ahead and type and be like, I'm here because I really want to learn about this. Or, if there's something specific that like a specific question that you've tripped up on before, we can definitely go over that. I'm just like anxiously, next time I should like play music in the background because I'm literally sitting just like in my house. Okay. All right. Well, as you guys sort of type that, um, yeah, it's just helpful to know kind of where you're at and like if there's anything that I can talk to help you. Even if you can tell me like what industry you work in or you know, maybe like a troubling question that you had. Okay. Okay. Um so I see a private message. I'm not going to like say everything because it's a private message, but I understand that if you've been in the same job for a long, long time, 15, 20 years, and you're just thinking about like, how do I even get out there again? This is a great place to start. So I'll keep that in mind. Thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing that. Okay, so it's 10 a.m. Um, I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes for everyone to join. Hi, Andrea. Thanks for joining. Can you guys see each other? Like, you can see all the other participants, right? I mean, you can, like, see the names. You can't, like, see each other virtually. That would be a bit much. Okay, you see names. Okay, makes sense. Great. And Andrea, I know you just joined, but if you could just maybe type a sentence about something specific that you're looking for, like maybe you are getting back into the interview pool and you just haven't done it in a long time. If you can just give me some context about, some of the specifics that would help you, then I can actually like tailor what I say to you guys. And you can send it to me privately if you don't want to have it be like broadcast to the world. Okay, well, while I wait for that, I'm sure some other people will join shortly, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to switch my screen so you no longer see my face. Although I did do my hair for you guys. It was kind of like a hot mess when I woke up. Okay, so let me switch the screen so I can actually start the presentation. Okay, and then let me just sorry, 1 second. I'm just gonna go look at this chat. Oh, thanks for saying my hair looks nice. That's nice. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and you guys can see my screen, right? Okay, perfect. So today we're gonna go over the basics of interview prep. And the way that I've structured it is I have really thought about what are the key things that you're gonna be asked in the interview. And it really boils down to 2 questions, okay? So let me just dive in, okay? So when you interview, every interview is going to have 2 parts, okay? So the first is the question. You know, when you walk in, you sit down, you say your niceties, and then they turn to you with like big, wide open eyes, and they're like, tell me about yourself. Okay, so we're going to be working on that question together today. And then the second part is, why do you want to work at this company? Why you? Why should we hire you? Right? If you can master these 2 things, I think that is like 80% of the work that you have to do. There are going to be like other questions that come up. There will be things that might throw you off. Maybe they'll be like, what are your salary expectations? You know, when can you start? Do you get along with your boss? Like all these little questions, fine, okay? But the bulk majority of what you need to work on whenever you go into any interview is these 2 things, okay? So when you walk into the interview, I'm just gonna give you this mindset that I like to think about as sort of the core principle, okay? So what you really want them to do is you need to have 3 things happen, okay? The very first thing is you need to make them like you. Meaning you need to turn on the charm. You need to smile. You need to compliment them. You need to pretend like you're meeting your in-laws for the first time. Like be the most gracious version of yourself, right? The second part is that you need to make them believe you, okay? And what this means is as you're telling your stories, right? Let's say you're telling a story about this data analytics project that you managed. It's great to talk about it, but you need to back it up with some facts. So every time you tell a story, you want to also say, okay, yeah, I managed this data analytics project, and I oversaw a team of 10 people, and over the course of 6 months, we actually grew revenue by 15%. Okay, so you need to back up your stories with actual facts and numbers so that your story is believable. And then the last thing is you need to make them trust you. Okay, so people hire people. They hire people that they want to spend time with, that they want to sit next to, right? And so who are you as a person? What are the characteristics about you beyond the job that make you the best candidate for this job? Okay? So the very first question is tell me about yourself, okay? So let's just dive in right now. Okay, so how many of you have been in an interview and you sit down and you get asked the question, tell me about yourself, and you start telling this story chronologically, okay? For example, you say, well, when I graduated from college, I had studied political science, and I thought that it would be a really nice thing to go work for a senator. So I did that for 4 years. And then after that, I decided I wanted more private sector experience. And then so I went and I'm a data researcher, blah, blah, blah. And most people who are, let's say, like mid-career, let's say you're like 35 years old or 30 years old, you have anywhere from like 8 to 15 years of work experience. And when you're telling your story chronologically, I am not going to lie to you, like it is just plain confusing. Because that's not how people think, right? Like that's how you think, because that's your story. Like you've lived that version of your life, right? But to a complete stranger, when you take them through the chronology of things, it's confusing, okay? And so instead of just the chronological, like I did this, and then this, what we're actually going to do is we're going to give them a summary, okay? And the reason that this is important is because hiring doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? So like when you're being hired, it's so rare that someone would meet you and have all the power in the world to be like, I love Andrea, I'm going to hire her. Like, that's it, my decision is made, right? Oftentimes you're being interviewed by 2, 3, 4, 5 people. And there's always, after the interview, there's like a convening, right? Where they all get back and they compare notes. Or oftentimes, let's say the interviewer has met with 4 people and they need to go in and give their recommendation to their boss or to their lateral, business partner and say, yeah, so I met with, 4 people. My favorite candidate is this person. Here's who they are. And it's like that 2 or 3 sentence thing that they say. Oh, Mandy, she's like that advertising girl. She worked in fashion. She has her MBA. She's got great hair, right? Like, and so what is the sentence? And so what I'm saying is, like, instead of going through the chronology of like, I did this, that, and the other, let's just create the summary for them. So when you sit down and the very first question is, tell me about yourself, give them the summary, okay? Because the interviewer needs to know, and literally they've never met you, and just assume, and this, I've heard this a lot, is you'll sit down and the person will be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so busy, I haven't had time to look at your resume. And of course you're like, excuse me, I got up at 6 this morning to get ready for this. I've, been preparing, and like, you are such an annoying person. You haven't even read my resume. But you know what? That shit happens. And so let's say you have 2 minutes. The interviewer hasn't even had time to look at your resume. They literally probably read it from the printer to the room where they're interviewing you. And here's the information that they need to know. They need to know, who is this person that's sitting in front of me? Where have they worked? And what is their angle? Okay? So I'm going to take you through what's just like a super easy pitch. And this is just a template. Okay? Like, obviously, as you get more familiar with it, you're going to be able to go through and actually, fill in the blanks with your own stuff, okay? But I find this template to be a really useful starting point, okay? So it would go something like this. I have 10 years of experience in the publishing industry where I'm focused on author acquisition. Currently, I am the senior editor at Random House where I oversee blah, blah, blah. And prior to that, I worked at blank, okay? So all you're doing here is you are literally just giving the person the most basic information about who you are, okay? I'm going to just pause for a second and make sure, are we all on the same page? Can you guys just like type something in the chat? Like, have I said anything confusing so far? Are you guys still with me? I'm going to just like check this out for a second. All good. Okay. Okay, great. Okay. 1 second, sorry. This I'm just dealing with this view. Okay, so, and I'm going to send you guys in an email this format so you can literally print it out after this webinar. But let's say you're like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start, because I swear to God, this question causes like so much terror and stress in people. I just wanted to break it down into like the easiest thing possible. Okay, so like even if you have a piece of paper next to you, go through and answer these questions right now. Okay, how many years have you worked? Literally, just like do the math from the time you graduated to now, right? What industry do you work in? Do you work in retail? Do you work in editorial? Do you work in finance? Do you work in whatever? What industry? Third, what department do you work in? Okay, so I work in the marketing department, right? Fourth, what is your current job and title? Fifth, what do you do there? Meaning you meet someone at a party and they're like, oh yeah, what do you do? Like just the simplest response. And then six, where did you work before? Okay, like just literally these answers should be a couple words, just so simple. Okay, so here's an example that I've done. I filled it out. Okay, this is a make-believe person, but actually this is my friend that I based this on. Okay, so she's worked for 13 years in the beauty industry in marketing and product management. Her current title is Senior Product Manager at L'Oreal. And what she does is new product development for hair care. And before that, she worked at Revlon and Honest Beauty. Okay? Like your answer should be as simple as that. And this is just like the blueprint of how you answer the like, tell me about yourself thing. Okay? So here is a sample easy pitch. And again, like I know this is dry and like I don't think anyone would actually say exactly this coming out of their mouth, but I just want to give you a flavor of like how you can structure the response. Okay, so this is someone who has a finance background. It might go something like this. Hi, so nice to meet you. My name is Sally. I have 15 years of experience in finance, and in finance, I focused on relationship management. So currently, I am the AVP of business banking at JP Morgan, and in this role, I oversee 10 accounts totaling about $15 million per year. Prior to that, I worked a variety of senior finance roles at Bank of America, and I received my MBA from Columbia. Okay, so this is like what you would say when you first sit down. It just gives the person the lay of the land. How many years have you worked? What industry? What the heck do you do? And like, what's your background? Okay. And here's another one. Okay, so this is for fashion. So you might see a fashion, creative, like, you know, obviously the opposite of finance. So I just wanted to give like a variety of examples. Okay, so here's the sample easy pitch for fashion. It might go something like this. Great. You know, my name is Allie. I have 10 years of experience in fashion, and I've been really focused on marketing strategy. Currently, I am the director of marketing at Gucci, where I oversee our social media, digital marketing, and traditional media. And before that, I worked at Vogue and Banana Republic in marketing roles. Okay. So again, it's just like this little tidbit that you can say. Okay, but the structure is the same regardless of industry, right? Now these I've called easy pitches because they're easy. It's like these people have really straightforward trajectories, right? Like they have worked in finance for 15 years. They've worked in fashion for 10 years. Like there's nothing to explain. There's no gaps. There's no like zigzagging. There's no career switching, right? And so I received a message in the chat asking, you know, if I was laid off, like, what do I say here? Great question. Let's go over it. Okay. So first off, I want to talk about, well, what happens if like your background is not so straightforward, which it never is, right? Like what happens if you have a complex story? Well, first off, and I'll get to the layoff thing in a second, but let me just go through like what happens if you have a bit of a crazy background, which everyone does, okay? So the first thing is you have to think about what do your jobs have in common? Meaning, is there an industry commonality? Like, okay, well, I've worked in finance and first I was a banker, but then I moved over into PR, which is totally different, but it's always been in finance, right? Or is there a commonality in the type of role that you've been doing? Okay, well, first I started off in real estate in sales, and then I moved over into beauty, still in sales, right? So like, what is that common thread that you can pull out from your background, whether it's the industry or the role or some kind of skill set, like some kind of skill muscle that you've continually flexed throughout your career? Okay. And so the next part of this is like, how do your roles connect, right? And so how did your last job help you with your current job? Okay. So I'm going to give an example here. Okay. So for example, it might be something like this. So I started in consulting where I was managing clients in the telecom and financial services industries. And here's the transition sentence. This is what you want to say, right? I really loved the analytics part. And so I used that to transition to my current role as a data scientist at Warby Parker. And I love the energy of the startup and the ability to move faster. Okay. Now let's talk about the layoff question. If you have been laid off, here's what I say. You still want to give the summary. You still want to say, I have X number of years of experience doing this. I specialize in this. These are my skills. This is where I've worked. Now, at the end of that, you can say something like, recently my company underwent some layoffs. And here's the trick. You want to say that you want to describe the scope of the layoff. Okay. So let's say that you are, okay, so I have a client right now who was just laid off. His entire team of 18 people were also laid off, right? So I always tell him, like, you need to say that. You need to say like, oh, okay, so as part of the larger organizational change, they decided to eliminate this group of 18 product managers that were all based in Denver because that group actually transitioned to Montreal. Okay, you want to give some background and then explain, so I was impacted by that layoff. And in the meantime, I have been doing XYZ. Right? And so you want to say like, well, what have you been spending your time doing? Right? Maybe you've been volunteering. Maybe you've been taking a class. Maybe you've been honestly depressed and interviewing and getting frustrated. Like, you're not going to say that, but I know that's the reality, right? But I think you can say like, after you explain the layoff, you immediately pivot into like what you're looking for next. Right? And you can leverage like, okay, given my 10 years of background in consulting, or given my expertise in telecom, or given my expertise in XYZ, what I'm really looking for next is a role where I can blah, blah, blah. Right? Okay. Another question that I just got is, well, what about if you quit and you haven't been working for a few months? So again, I like to give the context of what was happening with the company, right? So I have another client who recently quit his job because what happened was he was working at this huge multi-conglomerate company. It was like $80 billion in revenue. And then his division was spun off. And then all of a sudden he was working at like this tiny rinky-dink company. And they were like, well, you can stay, but like basically your job just shrank. Like you have like no job. Like you're going to just be sitting around and like analyzing data. And this guy has an MBA. So he's like, this doesn't make sense. And so he quit. Like he wasn't fired. He wasn't laid off. He quit. He was like, oh, F this. Like I don't need this environment. Like it's crazy. Right. And so what he does is in the explanation is he says, look, I really loved my job. I, want to stay at a place for a long time. However, here's what happened. I was working at this large company. My division got spun off. There's always something contextual that's outside of your personality that you can use to explain like one of the catalysts for you leaving, right? So maybe your group changed, or maybe the nature of your role changed. And you always want to remind people, like, well, after working there for 4 years, right? Or like after, or let's say you only stayed at your job for like 6 months because you're like, this place is a shit show. I gotta get out of here, right? You can also go into your past and be like, look, I am not the type of person who likes to job hop. Prior to this job, I was at my last job for 5 years, right? It just so happened that, and then you talk about the extenuating circumstance, like the company was headed in a different direction. There were layoffs. You could see the writing on the wall. So you made the proactive decision to leave. And then you like, don't even take a beat to have like a sob story. You just go straight into, but here's what I'm looking for now. Okay, you just go straight into it. Okay. I'm going to keep moving on. And if you guys have more questions about like the layoff quitting, let's definitely tackle that at the end. Okay. Let me know if there's anything else regarding this that you want to talk about. But I'm going to go on to the next section, which is why this job. Okay. So after you've had your spiel about like, this is me and this is my background and this is why, this is what I've done, my skill set. At a certain point, the interview is going to turn, right? And they're going to talk to you and be like, well, why do you want this job? Okay. And so here's the thing, like get into the mind of the interviewer for a second, right? Whoever's interviewing you has to a minimal degree, at the very least, has drank the Kool-Aid of that company, right? That they wouldn't be like sitting across from you, interviewing you if they themselves weren't at some level bought in, right? And when you're interviewing, you really want to make sure that the people you're bringing on have done their homework and that they are, people are snobby. Like they are. They want to make sure that like who they're bringing in is at the right level or the same level that they are. Okay. So I think you have 3 things that you have to accomplish when you are answering this question. The first is proving that you understand the mission of the company. Okay. The second is proving that you're qualified for the job. Like, okay, so can she do the work? Like, does she have the skill set? Does she have the background? Or does she have, some, like if it's a quant job, like is she good at math? If it's a writing job, can she write? Right. And then the last thing is explaining why like you and the job are this perfect fit. Okay. So I'm going to go into each one of these things. Okay. So the first thing is, I always think it's really important to sort of explain back to the interviewer that you understand what the mission is of the company in layman's terms, like that you really get it. Okay. So I'm going to give an example. I'm going to go through, I have these 3 examples here. And I'm in Denver, so of course I had to include like REI Co-op. For those of you who don't know, it's like an outdoor company. But I just want to go through and take you through some examples of like, okay, what would you say is the mission for each one of these companies? Okay. And for whatever company you're interviewing with, I want you to do this same thing. Okay. So for REI, what they say, and these are all like pulled from their website, and then I'm going to tell you what I think is like the key term that you really want to hook onto. Okay. So for REI Co-op, they talk about its membership and its community for a lifetime of outdoor adventure. Basically, it's like an outdoor store where you can buy like skis and like golf equipment and like hiking boots, okay? But they don't see themselves that way. They see themselves as a place where it's a community and it's for these enthusiasts who are like so obsessed with the outdoors, okay? So a lot of times when you sit down and people are like, well, why do you want this job? A really great first thing to say is something like this, where you can say, well, here's what I understand the mission of the company to be. I think that the company is really about community and really about building this lifetime of membership for like-minded people who are obsessed with the outdoors. Like you're just showing them that like, what this company is, and more than just like a place to buy hiking boots, it's about this community, right? So same thing with SoulCycle. So SoulCycle, you might say, is just a place where like rich women in expensive yoga pants go to like, bicycle. But no, that's not what they believe. They believe that it is a meditative fitness experience, that it is literally something that is life-changing, soul-altering, combining of body and mind, right? So if you were interviewing at SoulCycle, you want to mirror that. You want to echo that. You want to throw that back to them and be like, I get it. This is not just a bunch of bikes in a dark room. This is a transformative experience. We are disrupting the way that fitness is being experienced, right? And so it's almost like you take their mission, but you put your own spin on it so that they are like, oh shit, like this person really knows what they're talking about, like they really get it. They're not just like interviewing because they got the interview, like they're actually here because they're like part of our tribe, like they get it, Okay. So Blue Apron, I personally feel like this company is like not great. I'm sorry if anyone works there. No, it's because I'm a home cook, and so I get all their like Facebook messaging, and I'm just like, ugh, like stop trying to buy me make me buy like expensive packaging. Like I don't care, right? But what they believe is that they're like democratizing cooking and making, delicious homegrown cooking available to everyone. And in doing so, they're like improving the food ecosystem. Okay. So I think what this kind of exercise is about is like understanding how to like speak the language of the company that you're applying to and go deeper and really echo back to them. Like if I'm interviewing with the CEO of Blue Apron, I'm definitely going to be telling him or her that like I believe in the democratization of food, and that I believe that like everybody deserves like a great meal. Like I am going to say those words, as corny and cheesy as they are. Like I am definitely going to blow that smoke, like you have to. Okay, so that's the first part, is just like establishing like, hey, I'm so on board and so aligned with your mission. Like I could basically already work here because I believe in it so much, right? And okay, so another exercise, and here's something where if we can do this together in real time, like just like write it down in your notebook, is when someone tries to ask you, okay, so what did you do in your current job? Or in the case of, let's say you were laid off and you need to talk about the last job that you had. Okay. Whenever I ask my clients this question, I'm like, okay, so tell me about your current job. It's like people get a little bit freaked out. They like don't know how to answer because they're like, okay, well, I do this and this and this. And I guess first I started, and it's just like, they just go on and on and on and on because jobs are complex, jobs are complicated. Like I get it. But I like to play this game where I go to them and I'm like, okay, stop, stop talking. Let's pretend that you just got a promotion and I am like a junior manager who wants to apply for your job. Okay. And I come to you and I like take you to coffee and I'm like, okay, I really consider you to be my mentor and I want your job. I'm going to apply for it. Can you tell me like what the inside scoop is? Like, what do I need to do to succeed in your job? Okay. Now, when you think about it that way, again, you're sitting across from like this young, bright person who is younger than you and like wants your job. And they're literally coming to you and being like, tell me what I need to do to succeed in your job that I'm going to apply for. When you think about it like that, then you can start talking about it like, okay, well, in order to succeed in this job, the most important thing is you need to understand data analysis. Okay. Like without that, you're not going to succeed. Or something I've heard a lot is like, well, the one thing that's the most important in your job, in my job, is it's relationship management. I am a product manager, so I'm constantly having to like put out fires and make sure everyone's happy, and it's just like build those relationships. So think about like the one piece of advice that you would give to the person who's going to take over your job. Okay. And then when someone says, okay, so what do you do in your job? You have to answer it like that. Okay. So for example, I'll take myself, like when I worked at American Express, right? What did you do, Mandy, in your current job? I would say something like, well, the job is one where I had to manage a lot of business partners. And the most important thing about that job is that I have to do a lot of training and education and relationship management to make sure that all of the business partners, all 36 of them, are happy and have the most up-to-date information, because I really am like the center of the spoke of that wheel. Okay. So, for yourself, think about like when you're talking about your current role, think about it through the lens of like, well, what is the most important thing and what was the thing that you needed to do in order to succeed? Okay. I hope that is helpful. Now, when you think about the last part, which is why you plus this job, right? So like it could be any variation of like, why should we hire you? Or like, in your experience, like, how are you qualified, or like, what experience do you have with data analytics, or like, what experience do you have with XYZ, right? They're basically asking you, like, why should we hire you? Like, and it's a lazy question because they don't want to like do the work. They probably ask all the candidates that. But one way to think about it is, okay, there are a certain set of skills that are required that are being focused on a target that is going to get some result, right? So when you think about this job, and of course, like, you never know because job descriptions can be confusing, but if you had to make a list of the formula for this job, make your best guess of what it would be. It would go something like this, right? So there's some skills, and here are just like a random list of things that it could be. Whether it's like you need to be like a marketing pro, or you really need to understand your data because it's a technical role, or they're looking for like a superstar project manager, or it's all about like financial analysis and Excel spreadsheets, or it's all about like your years of experience in, your medical skills because you're a doctor, right? No matter what it is, like the first thing is like, what are the skills that they're looking for? And then the second thing is, what is the target? So who are we applying these skills to? Right? So like, is it about customer acquisition? Is it about like selling to B2B? Is it about, patients? Or is it about like, oh, it's an app for kids, and so we're targeting parents, right? So think about like, what are you using the skill to target? And then in order to get what result, right? So like, the result would be you want more of something. The company's trying to make more money. The company's trying to get more customers. The company's trying to get more social media traction, whatever it is, right? But this is the formula. It's like they're hiring someone because they need the skills to apply to a target to drive a result, okay? So before you even walk into any interview, you should just be like writing on a little piece of paper for yourself, like, what skills do you think they really need? What are they applying those skills towards? And then like, what do they want? Is it just, most times it's like they want more money, right? But it's oftentimes like nuanced too. It's like, well, they want more customers, or they want more engagement, or they're a startup and they want the brand to get out there, right? And so it's really about understanding these three things and then going through and being like, well, I have the skills. I understand the target, and I have a track record of delivering these results. Okay, so that's sort of like the really easy formula that you can use to think about it. Okay, yes, here I go. I was like, I have the skills, I know the target, and I can deliver the results. Okay, and this is the last slide, guys, because I wanted to just leave it open at the end to take questions and have a discussion. But this is an exercise that I go through with my clients. Like, let's say they're applying for a job. Okay, I'm going to use a real example. So I had a client who recently was applying for a job, and it was to be like the quality assurance manager for like a national organization that paired legal guardians in the courts for foster children. Okay, and so we did this example together, and we were like, okay, so what's at stake here? Okay, so if you're like the quality assurance person who makes sure that the foster children are getting, the right legal representative, like, what's at stake? Like, what happens if you're like really, really terrible at your job and you like, there's no quality assurance and people are not matched correctly? Like, what's at stake? Well, what's at stake is like children's futures, right? And like their ability to have like good, consistent quality care. And to be looked after in the judicial system, right? So that's like a very specific example. But for every job that you're applying to, you really want to take a step back and be like, well, what's at stake? Like, what if they hire someone who's terrible and they don't do the job right? Then like, what happens, right? So like, it could be something like, well, you lose customers, or the brand is tarnished, or, you lose money, or any combination of things. I want you to really write down like, what's at stake if I don't do a good job? And then the way you use that is you reverse it, and you say, okay, well, here's what's at stake. I know what's at stake. And so you mirror it back and you say, I know that this job is so important because, XYZ is at stake. Like I understand like why you're like, if the data isn't clean, then the people in the research study aren't going to be, having valid results, or like if you're a news organization, like, okay, well, if we are not at the cutting edge of delivering like the most accurate and responsible reporting, then, our integrity is at stake, or our reputation in the market, right? So it's just a question that you can ask yourself when you're going into the interview, to really understand like why are they hiring who they're hiring right now. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left. I wanted to just open it up for a Q&A, and if you guys have any questions at all about your specific thing, and if you want to message me privately and then say, I want to talk about it, but like don't give every detail, like that's totally fine, because I understand like this stuff is sensitive, So what questions do you guys have? Do you have any responses or any, or even just like tell me a funny story, like tell me like, oh, I had this horrible interview the other day, like just tell me, and we can kind of laugh about it or go over it. I'll let you guys type for a minute. Thanks, Sophia. Okay, so love you, miss you. I'm obsessed with you. Okay, so I have seen, okay, I'm getting a private question. It was actually in the beginning, but I'm going to address it now. And the question is about, there's a lot of questions in here, but let's talk about salary. Okay. So if someone asks you about the salary, and by the way, I think in New York, it's like going to become illegal sometime soon to like not be able to ask. But anyway, of course, people are still going to be like buttholes and like ask, right? So here's how I think a good way to do it is. So you typically do want to, okay, so first off, you should always try to get a range from them first. So like, let's say you're working with a recruiter or someone in HR, like early on in the process, like if you can ask what the range is, you always want to get the other party to identify what the range is first. However, of course, that's not reality. I understand. So a lot of times, what you can do is say something like this. Okay, well, for the past few years, I have been working at a director level and, overseeing large teams, managing large sets of data, creating new initiatives. And at that director level, I've been compensated from a range of, 120 to 145. Or, if you're more junior, you could say 70 to 80, whatever it is, right? But you want to give a range and then say, I think what's important is to say that you have been operating at this level, right? So it's not like arbitrary, like, oh, like I just am getting paid more than everyone else. No, it's that it's literally like legitimized by the fact that like, well, I've been being paid like fair market based on my level that I've been working at and like the number of people that I've been overseeing and the level of responsibility. Now you can also couch it with, I'm really excited about this job and I'm open and, I understand that, like, let's say that it's a different industry or let's say you're moving to a different city or region. I mean, you can say, but I'm open and I understand that given, it's a different market or a different region, like I have some flexibility, but just, that has been my range. Okay. Now, you had said in your thing that they ghosted on you. I mean, here's the thing. I don't even know that it's about the salary. It could literally be just that they are a disorganized organization. And I mean, I think part of it is like you want to have a lot of balls in the air and not put everything in one basket. I know it's so hard because like, first off, interviewing is so exhausting. But I think that if you can juggle multiple things. Also, let's say they did ghost on you. One of the ways is the reason to have like multiple things going on is you can say, well, hey, just wanted to check back in. I'm in late stage conversations with another firm. Still interested in talking to you. Let me know, da da da. And like, if they don't respond after that, like, when people show you who they are, believe them, right? So like, if they are being unprofessional and ghosting, like, okay, then they're probably kind of a bad company anyway. Like, it just is that. Okay. So a second question that I got, and I'm gonna kind of like go back and forth, but the second question I got is like, what do you do when you feel yourself slipping and the interview is going in a bad direction? How can you salvage it mid-interview? So here's the thing. I mean, all interviews are a dialogue, right? It's all about energy. And I think sometimes it's just about having a subtle reset of the energy, meaning literally, and okay, here's my example. I used to go and do these pitches. So I used to work in startups, and I was raising money. And so I would go into these rooms with like these awful men, and I would just pitch and pitch and pitch all day long. I must have done like 50 pitches. And for sure, there was definitely some times where like you could just see like eyes glazing, starting to check the phone, just like saying something rude or inappropriate or just random, or just like clearly being like, oh, that's nice, girls, and like, metaphorically patting my head and being like, get out, So definitely I know that interviews can take a bad turn. And I mean, oftentimes, here's the thing, is it's not about salvaging. It's just about like trusting your instincts and being like, I don't like how this is going. And so, taking some of that ownership back and being like, yeah, I'm not really into it either, because it has to be like an equal energy. But I would also sometimes do subtle things. Like I would literally, stand up and unplug my computer and just to change the energy of the room. Or I would like make a joke, or I would ask a different question, so I think anything that you can do to like pivot and change up the energy of the room, I think is like the best you can do. And then also like not be hard on yourself, because maybe that person is just like not a nice person and it's not personal. They just had a bad day and they're kind of a meanie and there's nothing you can do, So that's why I say, like, with this interview process, it's so much just about resilience, and it's about being kind to yourself and being like, I did the best I could. I have a tendency to beat myself up after this interview, but I'm not going to do that because I showed up and I did my best and it wasn't a fit, and it is what it is. And there'll be more around the corner. And the people who win are the people who get up and keep trying, So I think that if you can just have the resilience and self-kindness to be like, it's not me, I'm great, I'm wonderful, like they're crazy, like that's just what it is, Okay, so one more question I see is specific examples of failure. Okay, now this is a really good question. Okay, so the question is, just for everyone so you can know, the question is, what do you do when you're asked, tell me about a time that you failed? Okay, so when you're telling a failure story, what you're really telling is a story of personal transformation and growth. Okay, so every story, you want to follow what's called a CAR format, C-A-R. Okay, C is challenge, A is action, and R is result. Okay, so in a typical story, like in a rah, everything is great story, like tell me about a time when you succeeded, right? You might say something like this. Okay, well, the challenge is that I was under a deadline to deliver this website to a client. It was really stressful. I was up against all of this stuff, right? The action that I took was I came up with a schedule ahead of time. I met with the client on a bi-weekly basis. I had, daily stand-ups with my tech team to make sure that nothing slipped through the cracks. And lo and behold, as a result, we were able to pull it off in time. Okay, that's a very basic story, but you get the idea. It's like you need to build up the arc of like, here's the challenge, here's what I did, here's the result. Okay, you can use that format in whatever story you want, whether it's tell me about a time you led a team, to tell me about a time you succeeded, to tell me about a time that you blah, blah, blah. Like, tell me about a time, like, use that format, okay? The difference with the failure question is within that structure, you need to also talk about how you changed, okay? Because failure is failure, but really it's about evolution and growth, right? And it's about the humility to know when you've done something wrong and the bravery and maturity to like fix it, right? And so when you're telling a failure story, like, don't choose a shitty story, like choose a real story. Like when I run through these questions with people, like they'll be like, okay, well, one time I failed to blah, and it's like something that's not a real failure, okay? I'm like, no, think about a time when you really failed. Like you were embarrassed, like you were humiliated, like a time where you were just like red-faced, like, oh my God, like I actually messed something up. Okay, you want to think about that. Okay, so one example, I was just working with a client where he was like, okay, my biggest failure is that I didn't meet this deadline. I'm like, no, because that has no emotional resonance, right? Like that's not a real failure. And so I'm like, no, like tell me about a time when you were actually humiliated at work and like embarrassed. And he was like, okay, well, this one time I was with a client and I, my job is to make sure that he sold asphalt. Okay. So he was like, my job is to make sure that the client has, sufficient, is using the right material mix, when I sell them these things. And he went to a site to inspect it, and it turns out that they were using it all wrong, and there were all kinds of problems. And he, I guess, was like too forceful or too straightforward with how he delivered the message. And it ended up that his boss got a called him into his room and was like, oh, like, I can't believe you like told our best clients that they were doing everything wrong. And so anyway, the failure, okay, the way to spin that story is to say, I failed to recognize that it's not just about the message, but it's about how you say it, and that we're not just here to sell concrete and road mix materials, we're about relationships. And so that was a huge oversight. It was very early in my career. And since then, I have learned right? So you always want to show like, what was that moment when you had to look inward and be like, ugh, like this is so painful, I'm so embarrassed, and like, but I'm growing and I'm getting better, And so ultimately you are the hero of the story, even though it's about failure and it sucks, like you are the hero. Okay. So you need to show how you turned it around and how you, like, the more you can really talk about that moment when you messed up big, but then you knew it and then you like stepped up and it was this challenge that you had to overcome. And a lot of times what a failure story is it's ultimately a story about, your personal roadblocks, like your personal blinders, like things that you didn't see that are personal, right? It's never like, well, the trucks just didn't deliver the stuff on time. No, that's not a failure story. The failure story has to be personal. It has to be about personal growth. It has to be about how you noticed it, turned it around, and how you're better, stronger, faster now. Okay. So next question that, so Andrea asks, I think you guys can all see this, how long should you wait to follow up after an interview? Okay, so I think immediately after the interview, you want to be sending your thank you notes. You want to be sending your thank you emails and try to make them personal, not just like, thanks so much for your time, but hey, I really found this conversation interesting. And also I found this article in the New York Times talking about exactly what we were talking about. Here it is, take care, right? So you want to do a little bit, like you're not writing a paragraph, of like, content. You're just like a little tidbit. Like you're just throwing them like a little bit of like, hey, I'm smart, hey, I'm thinking of you, that kind of thing. And if they don't write back to your thank you email, like don't worry. Most people honestly don't have great etiquette and they don't, but that's okay. You did your part. Now, I don't think that's really what you're asking though. You're asking, hey, I interviewed, I sent my follow-up, I sent my thank you emails, and it's been 10 days and I have heard nothing from the recruiter, and like, I'm going crazy. What's going on? So I think in that case, I think a week is a good time to follow up. And it's also about knowing like who to follow up to. So it depends on what your relationship is, right? So like, I think the go-to person would be whoever in HR or whoever the recruiter is. But the problem with that is that sometimes they're just a bureaucratic wall, right? Like they're not really gonna pass your message along, and like what power do they have anyway? So let's say you did have a great conversation with your interviewer, like a really great one, and you really connected, and he or she was like patting you on the back and being like, oh, it's so great. Like if you had a good connection, then I also think it's fine to follow up with the person that you interviewed with, just to be like, but you want to, like, here's the thing is you always need to have a hook. Like if you just say like, hey, just checking in, like it's not really going to be effective. I think that you kind of have to play it hard, and again, like I said earlier, like having multiple things, it's always good to be interviewing at least 2 places at a time, because then you can work them against each other, and you can say like, really enjoyed our talk, just wanted to let you know, I am continuing the interview process with other companies. Even if you're just like having an initial phone interview, like you can still say that, and just like anytime you follow up, I think there has to be like a little hot rod that you're like pushing into them, like it can't just be like a light tap. Like you should give them a reason that they need to like move on it. Okay. So if you can create some kind of, even if it's fake, if you can create some kind of urgency, I think that will work very well in your favor. Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? I'm around, next 7 minutes, all yours. Okay. If you don't, that's cool. I also do free consultations one-on-one. So if you wanted to, like, if you have a burning question, you go to my website, Rose Gold Careers, under free consultation. My entire calendar is online. I do that for my sanity and because I have 2 young children. So I literally have to like schedule everything or else nothing will happen. So you just book a time. You pick a time. Then it's 30 minutes one-on-one. I'm happy to do a call, walk through anything. And then if you have an interview coming up, I do like a one-on-one interview prep session where I go through everything in detail specific to you, obviously. Wouldn't that be so funny if like my interview session was literally just like me like sending you a recording of this webinar and people are like, you're the worst. No, of course, it's personal. It's like one-on-one. Also, I sometimes will do it on Skype. I like make you do it on Skype so I can see kind of like your hands and what you do and what your, communication style is, so I can help with that. I actually just did one with a guy who got the job, by the way. And we literally, I was like, you need to wear a different tie. Like that tie is ugly. Some people just don't have, I was like, try a red tie, try a blue tie, not that checkered one. But yeah, if you want to have stuff like that done, I'm happy to work with you too. And yeah, so thank you guys so much. Here's my email. It's mandy@rosegoldcareers.com. Thank you so much for joining. And with that, I think we're good. Yeah, so you can type anything for the next couple minutes, but in the meantime, I'm going to stop this webinar and please, please, please get in touch. That's the whole point. I'm a real person. So, okay, I will talk to you guys later. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye. Oh, I don't even know if I did that.